All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. Welcome back to another Tuesday Talk. I can't believe this is already the last one of the semester. Somehow it's already December, but thanks for joining us. We are joined today with my dear friend, Emily Smith, who is an area sales manager for a local Fort Collins favorite. And our topic today is on sales. I'm so excited to talk with Emily. She was one of my dear friends in the Corbett Residence Hall, our first year at CSU, so go Corbett. But as always, just a reminder, this session is being recorded. The link will be posted in Handshake tomorrow under the Alumni Employer Chats resource card for all to listen to as a podcast whenever is convenient. So as I said, Emily is an area sales manager. She's based in Chicago for a local Fort Collins favorite, Odell Brewing Company. If you haven't heard of that local powerhouse, Odell Brewing is an independent family and employee-owned regional craft brewery, which makes Emily a part owner. In her role, she's responsible to work closely with wholesale partners as a value-added resource for the Odell brand portfolio. She achieves volume, revenue, and sales results through effective management of distributor and account relationships while working to increase points of distribution. She's responsible for the sales in all of Illinois, Missouri, and Wisconsin. Welcome, Emily. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Patty.
We're so excited. We'll have 20 minutes here to chat and then 10 minutes at the end for live audience questions. But for those on the line now, if you have any questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat or raise your virtual Zoom hand. So Emily, I'm glad we could snag some time while you're not traveling and working. We'll go ahead and get started. What are you up to? You're constantly on the go. What does an area sales manager do for one of my favorite companies?
Sure. Yeah. So a big part of my focus is going into accounts, bars, liquor stores, restaurants, and just trying to get them to buy Odell, keep it on, get our new seasonals in. I would say is a big portion of my job. Another part is I do tastings at liquor stores, having customers try the product, some promotions at restaurants and that kind of thing. And then another big portion is dealing with the distributor. So working for Odell, kind of like the middleman, middle woman, if you will. And we deal with a distributor who's punching our orders and delivering our product to these accounts. Mm-hmm. But I go ahead and sell the product to the account, tell my distributor partner, and then they will deliver the beer. So a big part of that is distributor communication as well.
I can only imagine with supply chain issues, has that been a factor in the last few years for you?
Definitely. Yeah. So a big one was aluminum cans. Ball, who, as in Ball Arena in Denver, who creates a lot of our cans. There was an aluminum shortage, and we moved to bottles a couple years back. And that's kind of just, everything has kind of just been delayed because of that. And then another big one is freight, the cost to get the product from Fort Collins out to the states I cover has been expensive as well.
I can only imagine. I went in to ship something just in a normal like FedEx. I'm like, wow, okay. Anyways, can you tell us a little bit about your career path? How did you end up here? You know, Odell and all of these craft breweries, especially local Fort Collins ones, are so competitive to get there. Can you just tell us how you landed where you're at?
Sure. So I've kind of always been interested in beer. Both my sister and my father work for breweries, Colorado local breweries. So it's always kind of something I've been interested in. Pre-pandemic, I was working for a local Chicago brewery in the tap room, fell in love with the beer scene even more. And then of course, COVID happened. So I was laid off there. Had a little stint in the middle in the tech industry and was randomly on LinkedIn one day and came across the Odell job listing. And it kind of just felt like the job had been listed for me and written for me. I went through 4 rounds of interviews and got lucky enough to land this job. I don't necessarily have a ton of sales experience. I had a brief stint in Fort Collins at a gym doing sales there, but that's kind of my only quote unquote sales experience. So it's just been a lot of learning as I go with a lot of things. You just kind of trial by error and figure it out what works best for you. But being from Fort Collins and Colorado, I really had that hometown roots in me. and I'm not the hard seller that people can be, but I believe in the product that I'm selling. So that helps a lot as well.
Oh, I can only imagine. That makes it 100 times easier, I'm sure. I think a stereotype of sales is that aggressiveness, that cold call, what has been your experience? Like, you didn't have much sales experience. Like, did you feel prepared to enter the sales upon applying for your role?
Yeah, so I think my familiarity with Chicagoland in specific was at least comforting, and I know certain bars and restaurants and have those relationships. So kind of leaning into relationships is how I am prepared. This is a relationship business. It's not necessarily about, I mean, it helps that the liquid is good, right? But the relationships you're making with your buyers are really what helps the most. But as for cold calling, I cold call a lot. I mean, Chicago is such a huge city, and me not living in Wisconsin or Missouri, I'm not as familiar with those locations. So I cold call a lot, but we have a CRM tool, which is a customer relationship management. So that kind of gives us a little insight on the accounts, who you've talked to or who your coworkers have talked to in the past, what they've bought in the past and when, that kind of thing. So that helps a lot to prepare. Additionally, I love to just go on a restaurant's website and kind of familiarize myself with their menu or what kind of styles they pour. If they're missing a sour, something we sell a lot of, that kind of thing is the best way to prepare for those kinds of things.
Good you. I don't know if I would get too distracted within the menus to be doing your role. So you touched on it a little bit, but what other kinds of skills and what types of commitments are necessary to be successful in sales in general, maybe within your industry, but just within sales as well?
Sure. Yeah. I think the biggest one I've had to learn is the acceptance of the word no. You never want to be told no, but that's a reality of sales, is being told no. At first, it was a little hard to not take it personally, but then it's like, well, if this product does not make sense within this company or with your account, I don't want it to just sit there. So definitely hearing the word no, and then just figuring out how to talk to people, right? Probing questions is huge in our industry. Just learning, people want to talk about themselves and their company and their business. So just getting people to talk, and building that rapport and that relationship is like the absolute number one thing.
Nice. Well, speaking of talking about yourselves and your company, is like, what excites you about your role? What excites you about the company? Like, what's the future look like in the next year, 5?
I wish I had the answer to that, because then that would be a really big, if I knew what the next revolution of beer drinking would be, we would be very happy. But working for Odell has been a dream of mine. I fell in love with it when I went to CSU, going to the Ramskeller, and exploring the local beer scene. Being independent and co-worker owned brewery was a huge draw for me. Being a co-owner myself is really, really cool. And that holds a little more stake for the company. Like, it's on me as well. I'm not just a employee, I'm a co-owner, right?
Yeah.
So I think just the beer world is ever changing. So I love the new and changing and fast pace of it all. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the future beer, the next big hazy IPA will be, or whatever the next style is going to be.
That's fun. What a unique industry. Maybe like building off of that on the opposite side, what are the challenges of your industry, of your role? Yeah. Love to hear that.
Yeah, definitely the biggest is competition. I mean, in Fort Collins alone, how many breweries are there just within a small little radar there? So my territory is the farthest east that we go. So okay. We're in 19 states and then 2 cities in California. So we don't have a huge footprint, and the farther away from the brewery you get, the more difficult it is. Mm-hmm. And then Chicago is an unbelievably populated city with people and breweries, and a lot of accounts really like to stay local. or hyper local, even like in the city of Chicago, not even the suburbs. So
Wow.
that is definitely a big one, is the competitiveness of this market.
I can only imagine. And just in general within sales as well.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about your sales cycle. Like, what does that look like for you? It's the holidays, like everything's ramping up, it seems like. Here personally within a career management center, this is our last event for students of the semester. So we're on the downhill a little bit. What does that cycle look like for you?
Yeah, for me as a supplier, it's also kind of on the down cycle for us as well. Kind of, we call it OND, October, November, December. Things are ramping up, but also there's not a lot to be done. I like to be seen and not heard. I'm just there to help merchandise and make sure product is on the floor and looking good. People kind of, bars are busy. They don't really have time to talk to you. So it's kind of a little slower. And then going into January, a lot of people do dry January. And February just being the 2 colder months, people aren't really out and about. So it's definitely a slower time for accounts. But then it starts to gear up come March, April, May, kind of prepping for summer. With one of our best sellers being Sippin' Pretty, a pink sour, people are way more likely to drink that in the summertime. I mean, I think it's good year round, but people more often drink it in the summer. And then summer is when you have all of your events, all of your beer festivals and that kind of thing. People are going out, they're spending money, they want to sit on a patio drinking a beer. So definitely the summer months are really crazy for us.
Oh, I can imagine. So thinking of like a typical week, it almost seems like you probably don't have a typical week. It's pretty untypical of like, what does that look like for you? Are you like, you're remote right now? Do you have an office that you go into? You know, you're out traveling. How often what does that look like travel wise? I know that's a big thing within sales and conferences and stuff like that what does that look like for you?
Sure. It definitely changes week to week. Something I love about this job is how flexible it is. I can take a call in the middle of the day if I need to. And the hours change too, because certain accounts might not open till 5 or 6 p.m. So I'll start later that day and work a little later in the evenings. But yeah, I don't have an office here. I just work from home when I need to sit in my office. Closest coworker is either in Minneapolis or St. Louis. So no one really close. So there's a little bit of an island syndrome there. But travel wise, I go to Wisconsin about once a month, St. Louis, which is another big market for us, about once a month, and then kind of sprinkle in some day trips to like Rockford, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half drive from Chicago. And that type of thing. So I travel a couple times a month during the week for a couple of days, but it varies. It could change tomorrow. Something could come up and I may have to be in Milwaukee tomorrow. I try and be prepared so I don't have to be, I like to be proactive so I don't have to be reactive. But that's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes it happens that way.
Super important. I bet you always have a bag packed in your car, which is company provided, right? Like there's some good perks about working for who you work for.
Absolutely.
You want to talk a little bit about those maybe?
Perks?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so they give us a company car, which is huge. I mean, living in Chicago, I've been here for 4 years and I've worked for Odell just about 2 years now. So I didn't have a car before that. In Chicago, you don't really need one.
Yeah.
So that has been amazing having a company car. We get to go out to the brewery pretty much once a quarter or every other quarter, which is great for me. I get to extend my trip often and see friends and family. When you hit 10 years with the company, you get a 4-week paid sabbatical, which is really exciting. Definitely keeps people wanting to push for that 10. And then every 5 years after that, you get another 4-week paid sabbatical.
That's awesome.
Definitely things to push for.
Retention. Cool.
Right.
It's nice when companies have that and something that people actually are looking forward to as well, helping keep that culture alive. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Emily, I know you're super involved back in college. Thinking back to your time at CSU, did anything you do here, whether that's coursework, internships, clubs, does that still impact or affect what you do today?
Sure. Yeah, I think a big one for me is, so I wasn't in the College of Business. I studied health and exercise science rather. So a big one, this seems like a weird relation, but I would have to teach the older population workout classes. But kind of that outgoing and putting myself out there and having to kind of react on the fly is something, or them asking a question and being able to explain it in layman's terms. Like not everybody knows how to break down a squat or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can kind of relate that into beer is sometimes you're talking to people who are extreme beer nerds and they know way more than me. But a lot of times people don't know what an IPA is or a sour is, or what the difference between why is this hoppy or why does this taste bitter and less bitter. So kind of being able to react and be able to explain it to every type of person.
Love it. We call that Sean proofing around the college business. I love you, Sean. Emily, what advice do you have for students that might be interested in going into this field? We have a new sales center, we have sales certificates. What advice do you have for the students that are potentially interested in this?
Yeah, definitely. If you're interested in it, no job is out of reach. I personally was like, how will I get this Odell job? I think somewhere around 300 people applied for it. And I just was not expecting it. But if you want it, then that's something you're interested in, just go for it. There's no company that is out of reach. And if you get rejected, at least you tried. So I would say just keep it up and definitely don't be afraid to reach for something if you think it's out of reach.
Excellent advice. I know that is this. We're so proud of you. Our first non-College of Business guest we've had on the Tuesday Talks here, but you're just doing such cool things and it's business related. So we had to have you. Fantastic. Well, students and those that are on the line, we're going to go ahead and open it up. So if you have any questions for Emily while we have her on the line, feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand, unmute yourself, show us your face. But while you're thinking of those, Emily, can you tell us what is your proudest accomplishment professionally so far?
I think honestly, getting the job with Odell is something I'm really proud of. Like I said, it was a really competitive job and not really having much sales experience. I was really proud of myself to be able to get this job. Going off of that, I think seeing the growth that I've made personally, and then within Odell in Chicago, it's kind of like a direct result. I can see that we're getting in the green rather than being in the red, or we're getting into bars that I've been trying to get into for a year. So it takes time. That's another piece of advice. You're not going to get it right away. It's a learning curve. But yeah, definitely I've learned a lot. And it's cool to see direct results of, oh, I can go to that liquor store down the street and they have a whole row of of Odell in the cooler. So definitely tangible, cool things to see with that.
Love it. I know I love walking into a place and seeing Odell. I'm like, oh, that's what Emily does. Good stuff. Well, we're very proud of you. We're so happy you could join us for these quick, short virtual events. Just a snippet on the topic and what company you're working with. But we'll go ahead and open it up. Is there anyone on the line that has any questions for Emily?
Emily, while we're waiting for students, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Because you talked a little bit about, I know Patty had asked what your day looks like, and you talked about, kind of calling on bars and restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look, what do you mean by that? What does that look like? What do you do? And you call, you said you might have to go multiple times. So think of a restaurant, think of a bar that you've done. What does that actually look like? What are you doing? Is there a 5-minute meeting? Is it an hour meeting? Do you call 3 weeks ahead? What does that look like?
Great question.
It all can vary, all of those things. Sometimes it's a quick, they're busy, or for that matter, they don't want to talk to you. That happens a lot. Or sometimes you get into a conversation and it can last longer. For example, I went into a liquor store just before this meeting and brought in some samples. Cold samples is always key of our, sorry, dog is barking. Cold samples, walking in and telling them what seasonals we have coming up, and kind of pitching them on how it's doing in other places around there. A new one for me is I'm trying to get better at my business math, and giving them profitability and kind of explaining to them the value that my product can add to their business. So that's a big one. Or trying to go to a restaurant and bringing them a can of 90 shilling and say, well, this is a perfect winter beer, kind of in between. It's not too dark, that kind of thing. Just kind of giving the pitch, explaining what value it can add is probably the biggest thing.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
I got a message here from Paul asking how he can move forward with working with Odell. There is a careers page on our website, and those are always up to date, and they will have any open job listings listed there.
Nice. And Emily, I know that there is one very active MBA alumni that actually works for Odell, and he's pretty often on campus engaging with students, comes to some of our meetups, but I know a lot of students connect with him on LinkedIn. Are you open to connecting with people on LinkedIn? How can students connect and maybe have a voice into Odell as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message if there's any questions I can answer, anything I can do to help you guys. Absolutely feel free to reach out. My name is a little generic, Emily Smith, but I'm sure you can find me through Patty or through Odell.
Nice. I saw another one come through the chat here, and it says, is your work typically commission-based? A great question.
Good question. A lot of sales jobs are, mine is not. I am just a base salary employee. And then there are some little bonuses here and there. If you have the most creative display in a liquor store is one, or I'm trying to think what else. We had a Red Robin incentive a couple of months ago. Whoever could get the most Red Robin handles won a bonus. So we have bonus options and opportunities, but no commission base.
Nice. That is interesting for a sales role.
Definitely.
That's cool.
Emily, I have a quick question. Thanks for chatting with us. It sounds like such a cool job and obviously an awesome place to work.
Right.
Having been in the position now for like 2 years, what's one thing that maybe you didn't know when you were applying about the position that you've learned throughout the past 2 years?
Sure. I've learned a lot. I'm trying to think the biggest one. I think adaptability. I've always been a flexible, adaptable person, but with this job, you really have to be able to change things on the fly, and then still be productive about it. So if I had a plan to be in a certain area, but I need to drop off a tap handle down south, being able to just react and be proactive to make a plan to still be successful. So I think adaptability is probably the biggest thing I've learned.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I see another one roll through the chat. Emily, is there anything students can do to help set themselves apart? What skills, classes, experiences to be successful in sales?
Sure. In sales, I think most times people have outgoing personalities. So I think being able to do your research ahead of time, be able to talk about your company that you're applying for, that was a big one for me. I mean, I did know a decent amount about Odell, but going in, being prepared in that interview is huge. I was a big one because I am from Colorado. So being able to I really leaned into the Colorado roots. And still to this day, I will go into liquor stores doing tastings and people say, oh, are you from Colorado? And I get to say yes. And I feel really lucky that I get to really lean into that. So that was a big angle for me. Additionally, being a female in a very male dominated field is huge as well. Most people I deal with are males. So that was another thing that kind of set me apart there, but that doesn't mean just because you're a male doesn't mean you can't work in this industry. But I just mean, be prepared, be knowledgeable, I think are your two best bets.
Come on into the Career Management Center. We can help you prepare for your interviews and help with that research, find what company you might be passionate about. For Emily, it's at Odell and beer, and you tied it back into your dad and your sister work for breweries. I think that really sets apart like how excited you are about your role as well, like because it's something that's always been there.
Right. Paul asked another question here. How easy or hard is it to move up the ranks within Odell once you start working for them? So just actually about 2 weeks ago, I got promoted. I was a field sales representative, which is more just hitting the streets and going to accounts, and then moving up to an area sales manager about 1.5 years, just under 2 years it took. And now I am having more distributor communication, and that would probably be the biggest jump in responsibility there. So a little bit less on the street and more time in my office there.
Nice. I know. I feel like I heard stories of like people that have worked their ways, like doing anything, wanting to, mop floors, and now have risen through the ranks, just getting to see the business from all angles. It's also an option.
A coworker of mine started, granted, he's been with the company, I think 18 years now, but he started as a line cleaner. So he would go and clean the draft lines. And now he's the regional manager of the East team. So there's definitely a lot of people start in the tap rooms as well, and then move to wholesale because we're self-distributed in Larimer County, and then moving to sales and whatnot from there. So definitely a ton of different paths within Odell.
Nice. I see another one come through the chat here. It says, how does working in an industry that involves alcohol differ from one that doesn't? Are there laws that conflict or intervene with what exactly you can execute in sales?
Sure. The alcohol industry is definitely unique.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say obviously drinking and driving would be a big one, a big law. But just being responsible with that. Odell is always never wants you to do that. They're always willing to pay for an Uber, that kind of thing. But a big one, is it's building that relationship off of sharing a beer together. That kind of thing is always huge. I'm trying to think if there are any laws specific, but nothing is really coming to mind.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I'm sure it differs from like the chip industry or something like that. But
Sure.
Yeah, without having those exact experiences, I can't think of anything either.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would say my days tend to start a little bit later. I do tend to go into liquor stores in the morning hours, but a lot of times, like I said, places don't open till 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So my nights can go late and I'm still working. So that is definitely maybe something a little different from the chip industry or any other type of sales.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I know we are pushing our time limit here. If there's anyone with final questions, feel free to pop them in our chat. But we're just excited to end our Tuesday Talk series of the semester. These were supposed to be quick, accessible, easy events to attend, listen to after, hear cool stories of our alumni. There's people doing amazing things. Emily's in Chicago living her best dream, so it's possible for everyone. So Emily, I don't see any chats coming through on my end. Are you good on yours?
I'm good on mine.
All right. Well, connect with Emily on LinkedIn, come into the Career Management Center if we can ever be of any help. And Emily, thanks again for taking the time. I know you're so busy, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Great to chat with you all, and best of luck in your ever endeavors.